Yes.
We're good.
Welcome to our June 14th budget hearing agenda, budget hearing. Before we begin, I just want to, if anybody's here for the planning board, wrong room. Planning board's upstairs tonight. Nobody's getting up. That's okay. So before we begin, just emergency evacuation in the event of an emergency. 2 doors on your left, another one up front here at council chambers. We would exit the building, cross Middle Road, and meet over at the school administration building and wait further instruction. If we could all now stand for our Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. No problem. Okay. All right, first item, and we have both the town council tonight and the school committee here. We'll take our council roll call, and then we'll identify the school committee as well.
Mr. Katzman,
Here.
Mr. Gleason,
Here.
Mr. Hamilton,
Here.
Mr. Levesque,
Here.
Dr. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Idea.
Here. And then from the school committee, we have the chair, Emily Copeland.
Here.
Fred Farber,
Here.
Karen McDade.
Here.
Sandra Blanc.
Here.
Okay. The other members of the council and school committee were unable to make it. But we do have a quorum, and we are going to proceed with our public hearing on the budget. And at that, we will turn it over to Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council, school committee, ladies and gentlemen. The proposed town budget was presented to the council at public meetings held on April 24th, 25th, and 26th. A motion to adopt the provisional budget was passed on April 26th. A motion to amend the ordinance and maintain the tangible tax rate at 15.651 was passed on May 22nd. We are here tonight to review the town council's provisional budget. And then following tonight, the final budget is scheduled to be adopted at the June 26th council meeting. So let's start on page 7 of the budget. You have to go to the website.
Actually, Mr. Rayner, before we begin, I forgot to mention we are live streaming. So those of you who are participating remotely, if you have a question during the public comment period and you're on Zoom, there's an icon to raise your hand. If you're calling in on your phone, *6 will indicate to mute and unmute your phone. *9 will indicate you have a question. Anybody participating remotely or in person tonight, Please state your name and address for the town clerk before you begin speaking. I also wanted to acknowledge Dr. Kenworthy's here as well, Superintendent. Sorry about that, Doctor.
Mr. President,
Yes,
emergency exit.
I already did that.
Okay.
I just
Yeah,
forgot.
just-
I just forgot to, I know, I'm out of order. Safety third. Let's go.
All right, so if we start on page 7 of the budget, here you will find my budget message that was sent to the council at the end of March. The letter was annotated to reflect a decision to maintain the tangible tax at the current rate, the latest tax assessor certification of property values, and the impact, that impact on the residential real estate and commercial tax rate. So the provisional budget approves $71,431,755 in expenditures from the general fund, which is a 1.92% increase over last year. The annual inflation rate for the United States was 4.05% for the 12 months ended May. It was just reported. This proposal will entail a residential real estate and commercial property tax rate of 12.782 per 1,000 in assessed value compared to the current rate of 15.651. This is about a $2.87 decrease or 18.33% decrease from last year's rate. So if we go to the top of page 9. Here we've identified that the total property levy will be $61,904,267. Individually, the residential real estate levy is projected to increase 3.65% over last year. The commercial levy is projected to increase 8.436% over last year, and the tangible property levy is projected to decrease 3.934%. There is no levy on motor vehicles as that tax has been phased out. The total property levy is determined by adding the real estate, commercial, and tangible property levies. This is a 3.75% increase over last year and is about $145,000 below the cap, which is the limit to which this levy can be raised over last year. Total revenues and expenditures are balanced and highlighted at the bottom of the respective sections on this page. For those interested, there is a detailed breakout of each of these levies, which can be found on page 15 and 16. So now if we scroll to page 10, here we can turn our attention to projected revenues. Starting at the top of the page, we can see projected revenues from specific sources. We project revenue from property taxes, state aid, government, general government operations, public safety operations, the Prudence Island Transfer Station, recreation programs, and rental income. Mr. President, the total revenues anticipated for FY 2024 found at the bottom of page 10 was provisionally approved at $71,431,755. So now let's scroll to page 26. And we'll turn our attention to projected expenditures. The first section on page 26 breaks out total expenditures for general government. For our purposes, general government is essentially made up of all functions and operations located in town hall. This was provisionally approved at $6,661,048. Next is public safety. That includes police and fire operations, and this has been provisionally approved at $14,848,761. Following that is public works. Public works includes road paving, public works operations, road paving, snow removal, and the Prudence Island Transfer Station, and that was provisionally approved at $4,307,103. This is followed on page 27 by recreation and parks, which was provisionally approved at $403,696. Next, we see civic support. Civic support was provisionally approved at $930,132. Following civic support, you can see the total projected debt service for next year, which is provisionally approved at $2,590,807. There is a breakout of town and school debt that can be found starting on page 72 for those interested. In the middle of the page, you can see the section labeled Other Items. The first line item that's listed is $134,841 in library aid. It should be noted that this is a pass-through from the state through the town to the Portsmouth Library. Next year's anticipated capital projects and expenditures are provisionally approved at $608,823. The capital improvement plan is presented starting on page 70. The other section, the section labeled Other, also includes funds to be distributed to the Other Post-Employment Benefits Account, OPEB, an Open Space Reserve Fund, a Capital Reserve Fund, and a contingency account. The total for other items was provisionally approved at $906,164. The school budget is summarized next. Let's turn to page 68, where we can see that budget more clearly. Okay, the school budget is a sum of various parts which consists of direct town appropriations and several other sources of revenue. The town appropriation was provisionally approved at $37,287,545. We expect federal impact aid of $270,000. We project state aid to be $3,496,499 based on the governor's proposed budget. Restricted revenue is projected to be $1,983,000. We go to the next page. We see miscellaneous revenue is projected to be $2,258,000, which is a sum of anticipated receipts, profit shares, tuition payments, and Medicaid reimbursement. The total school unrestricted and restricted budget is a sum of these sections and was provisionally approved at $45,295,044. So if we return to page 27, at the bottom of the page, we see that the total town and school budget sums to $71,431,755, which the council has provisionally approved and is equal to projected revenues. The last budget sections to be discussed are the enterprise funds, which begin on page 82. The first enterprise fund is the Glen Farm Equestrian Center. By contract, the concessionaire shall pay the town an annual base fee, plus a percentage of their annual gross receipts. An amount not to exceed the first $5,000 of revenue share generated is credited back to the concessionaire to be invested in repairs, renovation, and long-term maintenance. This is monitored through a regular review of the center's financial statements by the Director of Economic Development. The projected revenue was provisionally approved at $19,422. Next, we have the Headley Street Transfer Station. This budget operates on a calendar year basis from January 1st to December 31st, and it was previously approved, I believe it was last November or early December. Next, we have the Glen Manor House. Next section. Okay. The town now earns revenue through a contract with a catering firm contracted to continue the use of the Glen Manor House as a wedding venue. So therefore, the enterprise fund has been disestablished this year. Next section. Okay, at the top of this page, we see the septic loan program. The Portsmouth Septic Loan Program was closed last year. We still have the CISLIP fund, which is offered at a cheaper interest rate. And then below that is the Arthur Daniel Howell House. In accordance with the concessionaire's agreement, the vendors are obligated to remit $30,000 base fee to the town. Also, as part of the agreement, the base fee is credited back to the vendor for continued renovations to the building. the council provisionally approved the $30,000 base fee and $30,000 credit. So, Mr. President, that ends the discussion of the general and town enterprise funds.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Okay. And as many of you know, the budget, when we had our preliminary approvals and hearings back in April, was on April 24th, 25th, 26th. We went through all of the department budgets, item by item, with those provisional approvals that were just restated tonight. This is a public hearing, so I'm going to open up the floor to any questions or comments from the public. Now is your opportunity to come on up. Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Hold on
President.
one second, Mr. Morris. Okay. Actually, Ms. Morris, if you could just hold for a minute. Mr. Levesque has a few items he wants to bring up.
Thank you. As always, you're gracious, Mr. Fitzmaurice. By the way, you got to vote for the water board. Congratulations. Yeah, right in. I don't know who, but in any event, I contacted the administrator with respect to concerns that I had and asked if it were possible to draw up a slide indicating some basic information that I would like to address.
Sure.
First and foremost, I do want to give great credit to the school committee, to the superintendent, and to the administrator for their, I think, almost Herculean efforts in bringing this budget in under the 4% levy cap. In particular, because we were aware that we were going to be getting reduced compensation from the state for the fact that our population, our school population has declined. I would like to point out that the 4% levy cap is a fairly arbitrary figure in its own right, but it's linear, and it was decided that that was the best way to go. Since the budget hearings, a couple of things have occurred, and I do want to give quick credit to the people to whom credit is due. Councilman Hamilton proposed that we, in fact, adopt a different schedule for the tangible property tax, and predicted that there would be passage of an act that would, in fact, have the state take over the tangible personal property tax. That has not been full blown, but it was to the tune of $25,000 that for each citizen who had tangible personal property. So, in effect, the state is going to be paying the town in lieu of essentially that tax. And because of the work that Mr. Hamilton did on that, the town will in fact garner some additional revenues that are of no impact, quite frankly, on the taxpayers. It's going to be levied by the state, and it will come off of our property tax roll. In addition, in particular, I want to give credit to, I was told actually, to Emily Copeland by Representative Cortman, Donovan, and McGaugh, and Senator Yuji Fuso, the total impact of the declining population has been modified. And in fact, the town is going to be getting additional revenues. It is phasing, so we're not out of the woods, but it is phasing a little bit so that we are going to have some additional income from the state. The reason this is significant is that when we complete our budget and we vote on a bottom line, regardless of any additional income we get, the school department and the town are limited to the bottom line that we approve. We could, in fact, win the lotteries and Administrator Rayner has been out at Cumberland Farms buying up ticket after ticket. But even if we won, and even if he was gracious enough to give it to us, which I'm sure he would, we could not expend that money. It's a bottom line budget. In addition, during the time that we were going over the line items, in particular, there was a line item that struck me from the school that caused me great concern. And again, I want to speak to the fact that the school committee and the superintendent were in total awareness of their obligation and responsibility to the students, but working very well with the town. And so they came over with this budget, but the concern, and so I don't think my concern was greater in any way than theirs. But one item that particularly struck me was that there was going to be a zeroing out of some of the expenditures associated with a federal grant that had to do with assisting some of the students, particularly who were having trouble reintegrating after the COVID. And it struck me, it is, I think all of you who have looked at any media will know that there's been a very difficult time for a lot of people, but in particular students, trying to be back to where they were perhaps before. And some of the students may have not been particularly safe at that point. So there was this money taken out. It struck me that it was money that could be well spent if it were returned. I want to be specific about this, however. This council only votes on the bottom line of the school department. I cannot direct. I don't even know if I can request that the school department do anything, even though they presented a line item budget. It is their responsibility as the school committee and as the superintendent to spend the money as they feel most appropriate. Nonetheless, that was the area that I thought certainly the money being pulled out, the accounts being zeroed out, that I would ask my council at least to consider adding monies back in to hopefully support those programs. So this graph that the administrator was kind enough to draw up for me indicates that let me just see here again. We are $145,214 under the 4% cap. Okay, and again, the cap was arbitrary, but we did make, I think, demand upon the town to live under that. We, in fact, successfully lived under that. I also asked that we look at what would happen, well, what exactly 1 cent on our tax rate would do would garner us in revenue. And that was the first question I asked. And I believe if you look up there, you will see that $1 on the tax rate will, I believe, achieve $45,234. Is that the correct?
1 cent. If you add,
Right.
if you increase the real estate revenue, real estate tax rate and the commercial tax rate by 1 cent. So in other words, if you went from 12.782 to 12.792, that would equate to a little over $45,000 in revenue.
Okay. And roughly the numbers that were zeroed out was about $90,000. So, which would be, in my mind, 2 cents on the tax rate. And if in fact, and that, well, that's for 1 cent, is $2 and, well, if you do 1 cent increase for a property valued at $250,000, the difference for that property owner in taxes would be $2.50 over the year. Now, it is a fair statement to make that that's on top of the other increase. So I'm not saying to you that it is simply $2.50, but I am saying to you that that would be the difference between actually, because I'm gonna propose 2 cents. It would be $5 on an owner of a $250,000 house. Now, it is in fact possible if you have a $500,000 house, that 250 becomes 5, and if it's 2 cents, it becomes $10. Okay, but, and I wanted to make this statement because it's not a motion or anything like this, is a hearing, but that's what I'm gonna do. And if you have a complaint about that, either right now or in the interim before we adopt the final budget, that determination in question should be raised. Okay, so I didn't want it to appear that I did it either to my colleagues, because we can't talk to each other. And sometimes that's a good thing. But I wanted to be able to say when we had the hearing for the final approval of the budget, this is my proposal, and as you know, I presented it. Okay, Mr. President, I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Levesque. So before I open it up, does anyone else have any comments or questions on the budget?
Yes, I would vote against that. I understand funding the schools. There is potentially money in the budget this year from the state that could do that for you without taxing our residents anymore. And yes, $2.50 is not a big number for a $250,000 house, which I would have to ask Matt, but I guess there's probably 30 of those in town. So most people are going to be getting it more, and it's not $250 this year. It's $250 this year, next year, the year after that, the year after that, and it compounds every year after that. So I think it's our job to make sure that we keep the budget increases as low as we possibly can. And I think both the school committee and the council and the school department employees, Dr. Kenworthy and Mr. Rayner have done a great job of doing that. And I wouldn't vote for expending any more money of the direct taxpayers of Portsmouth. There is, depending on what the Senate does, and looking at the agenda for tomorrow night, it looks like they've essentially just moved the House budget over, which generally means that they're just going to pass the same budget. That doesn't mean something doesn't happen on the floor, but it looks like the school department is in line to get an extra $101,000 from state funding. So I would actually like to move $100,000 from the school budget to the town capital, the town contingency fund. So that way, if God forbid something happens at the state house, because it tends to happen, and that money does not become available, we still have it in the budget. I'm not asking that we cut the budget. I'm just saying we move it from the 37 million. Got it. Here we go. Take the local appropriation from $37,287,554 down to $37,187,545 and increase the town's contingency fund to $125,000. Keeps the money in the budget, puts it on the town side. The schools will be seeing an extra $101,000, so that increases the school's budget a little bit, but lowers again the jumping off point for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. President,
I just want to, I know you, Mr. Hamilton just mentioned 100,000. When you were talking, I was scrambling because I thought I saw something today was 96,000. Is that, do we know the number? I thought there was an article in the paper that said 90.
I don't know what the Senate's doing. I know that the House Finance Committee passed 101,000, but I don't know what's going on tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean,
as somebody who was up there, the Senate doesn't change they don't change the budget. They never do. I was one of the few people who tried to, but in any event, I think your comments, Councilman, as to what you would do, I think, as far as I'm concerned, that's what I was saying. And that's what I think is appropriate for everybody. I really don't know if we want to have a debate upon the issue. I'm more than willing to, but I think whatever anybody thinks is their current idea would be great. But we're going to actually do it at the budget final So now is the chance to say what you might do, so everybody have a chance to say that they agree or disagree.
I just said what I might do.
Okay,
And I hear you.
okay,
And by the way, none of what you said was not anticipated by me.
okay, all right. This is the public hearing, so this is great. Dr. Kenworthy.
Yeah, I was going to say to that point, I mean, I've seen the number listed 3 different ways in the past few weeks. So I don't know if we know for sure where that number has landed. The Bureau.
I would say you have subtract $1,073 out of that.
Yeah, there,
Actually, hold on, Mr. Diorio. I'm gonna need you to come up. Yeah, my fault.
As per every year, this is the most difficult thing we have to do because. And we're actually getting a break this year because they're finishing the budget this week as opposed to finishing it on the 29th of June. When we've already done our budget and then we have to backtrack and figure out what they did to us.
Okay,
So this actually makes it a little bit easier.
all right. Now, Mr. Diorio.
Okay, so like Dr. Kenworthy said, there have numbers been thrown around, a lot of different things. The schedule I saw, $101,000 included $1,073 of English language learner money. That does not go into the general fund, but is sort of like almost a categorical grant and you have to spend incremental and get reimbursement. So I would not include that if this motion is considered.
Okay.
Or idea is considered.
Thank you.
Stephen,
Absolutely.
I knew that the administrator was going to bring all of this information back to us at the time of our final hearing. All right, so, I mean, he is probably looking at this closer than I am. And the superintendent the same. I just wanted to say to people here, if you're real happy with this, great, but I may change it. So, and if you're not happy with it, then tell us now too. So that's all I wanted to make sure was.
You know what? And I appreciate that you're doing it ahead of time. And I'm sure the staff does as well, because they have to make all these adjustments and get it into the state right after we make the vote. So same reason I'm bringing up the $100,000 movement. It's there. Unfortunately, Ryan has to now make up 4 different budgets and figure out which one we're going to pass. So
Is to be ready. Okay, all right. At this point, I think we're good with comments from this side of the table. Mr. Fitzmaurice, come on back up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I'm going to ask the town administrator, probably going to respond to this, but to go back over some of the business of moving assets around regarding the tax rates and the taxable properties. This is on page 15 and 16. This has been corrected in the budget that we have before us a couple of times, I think at least a couple of times. And I think I understand this, but I want to make sure I do. It appears that we have moved the assets, the taxable assets, taxable properties from one of 3 categories to another category. And it appears to add up to me, generally speaking. But we didn't change, and the question is, we didn't change the assessed values in this process, right? So nobody's assessed value got changed. So,
Generally, that's absolutely true. I think that there were some minor changes from people who have come in.
I understand there's some appeals, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. So thank you for that. I would like to point out respectfully that on page 15, the new page 15 and 16, they are certainly noted as having been changed, but doesn't say what's been changed on it. So I pretty well figured it out more or less. But I think most anybody else that looks at this budget is not going to know what's been changed. So in the future, I'd like to have more detailed notes on those pages. I think that was known to us, of course, because we've been having this conversation for a while. But if you weren't a party to that, you wouldn't have had any idea what had been changed.
So specifically on this page, you're looking for on page 15, a note next to the tangible top property taxes were from the original budget were changed from 12, I forget what it was, 9, back to the 1565.
Essentially,
You would
yes.
like a note stating that. Okay.
Because this is the, from the taxes point of view, this is the main page, 15.
Understood. I'm just trying to figure out what type of a note you're looking.
Yeah, so if you'll see up on the screen on the budget that's posted, we keep a record of changes page.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and I think that identifies what was done, but we can certainly add more detail on page 15 and 16.
I think it's just it's a bubble box or something with an arrow pointing that this was changed from the original budget to this number.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Predominantly, those changes are exemption amounts. We have some variable income exemptions that the applications aren't due till June 1st. And they're based on
Okay.
income. So people come in, and they this much money, so the exemption changes. So that's, I would say, 95% of the
Right.
changes.
Okay.
And just for the record, that was Health and the tax assessor.
Yes. So I appreciate that thought as well. The more you look into this, the more complex it becomes. So if anybody was listening on the television and they don't understand this, I understand your confusion. Let me move on. I want to speak to the capital funds deficit, which is page 86 is where the I think that's the funds that are listed. I did some research and found a town ordinance. And I'm concerned and have been in the past about a lack of controls over the fund balance. When the fund balance changes, it may change for many reasons. But when we run a deficit in one of these funds on page 86, that affects the fund balance. And those fund balance changes are required by ordinance to be approved by this council.
Are you talking about the special reserve funds?
Yes.
Not the capital reserve funds.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the correction. And I have a copy of this thing and it was passed in 2011. And I was in the room when it was done and maybe somebody else was as well. So,
Just a note, the
Yes, sir.
special revenue funds are not included in the fund balance or the general fund at all. They're completely separate. They're added here for information. But yes, there is money that goes in and out of these funds. They're special funds.
but does not the fund balance be affected by the deficits in this,
Not at
in
all.
any of these things?
Just to clarify, insofar as we have to liquidate the deficit, yes, it could, and the council would have to approve that move. Yes, so you're correct. So if we had to liquidate the deficit using the general fund balance, that would have to come before the council. They would have to approve that.
That of course is the point.
But that hasn't been done.
Right,
It's-
that
it's-
hasn't happened.
As long as I've been here, we've never done that.
Well, I think we'll reserve that discussion for another day.
Well, do you have a specific incident, Mr. Fitzmaurice? that we
Well,
should
yes,
look
I
into?
spoke to the council about this once before. If you look at 86, you've got, there's what I read to be deficit amounts in 1, 2, 3 on page 86 alone in the special reserve funds.
Yeah.
And if you go on, there's others. So, and this was reworked to avoid confusing people like me. So I appreciate the higher clarity. But in any case, those indicate on the way I read things as being a negative balance. Now, we shouldn't be spending money we don't have. And that's my point. And when you spend this money all of these deficits have to be covered somewhere. And my understanding of how all of this works is it ends up being covered by, in fact, reducing the fund balance. So now I grant to the people that are trying to keep the books that they probably don't find out about these things until after it's been become a fact. But, you know, this is an important matter for maintaining the fund balance is an important matter for maintaining our bond ratings and a bunch of other things as well. It's not a passing academic interest. So if anybody wants to know, I can read them the fund balance, the fund balance ordinance, the unrestricted general fund balance ordinance from chapter 65. So we don't have any controls in place apparently because we don't get any reports in the audits. And we've been trying to get this thing fixed for a while. And I just pointed out because we don't seem to be getting it fixed.
I'll just state, Mr. President, to the council that this is a snapshot in time, December of 2022. A lot of these funds have activities that run in, there's money that goes in and out throughout the year. So you may have a fund here, for instance, the SAFER grant fund that shows the deficit as of the, that date, that snapshot in time, but we're waiting on reimbursements for the SAFER grant. So, if there was a problem, we'd bring it to your attention, and I appreciate the comments here, but I wouldn't say that there is something nefarious going on here. And we've never taken money out of the general fund or the fund balance that has not been approved by the council. There have been 2 instances where you've authorized that in the past couple of years, and that was for capital projects, and that was it, period.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Rayner.
An additional clarification. You keep referring to the unrestricted. This is not unrestricted, Mr. Fitzmaurice. This is a special revenue fund. It's not the same thing.
I understand that they have a different name and that they're not part of the budget and they are not part, in many cases, of calculating the unrestricted fund balance. The point is, if you have a deficit,
Okay, hold on. Is
this on the agenda for tonight? Or are you
Well,
yes,
taking
it
us
is.
down the path to an open meeting violation because we're discussing something that's not really on the agenda tonight?
I
Well-
think the comment was, there was a comment about the specific fund balances that are shown here under special funds. In my opinion, Mr. Rayner has addressed it, that this is a snapshot. It's not a year-end
Agreed.
summary. And so I think at that point, it's a comment. It's Mr. Fitzmaurice's prerogative to make the comment. I do agree, though, we don't need to go off topic of reading the ordinances because the ordinances, that's not what we're here for tonight.
that's fine.
you.
And I think that's the end of my comments. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thank you for your comments, Mr. Fitzmaurice. Thank you, Mr. Lebec. Come on up, Mr. Grebe.
Tom Grieve, 110 Thayer Drive. When he was presenting this, Mr. Rayner said that on page 72, there was more information about the bonds for people that were interested, and I'm one of the few probably that is. So if you could put page 72 up, I would appreciate it. If you notice on this, it's the list of bonds. First of all, let me say that these pages in the original budget were not what's on the screen here. And we were supposed to get changed ones. They have been changed, but that wasn't notified. And that's something that we were trying to make sure happens.
Yeah, that was brought to our attention during the budget meetings, and we said we'd correct it. So we immediately corrected it, posted the budget online.
But it's not posted as a correction. That's the key thing that I want you to understand.
I understand perfectly, Mr. Grieve, and what we will do is we'll put a note on here, but there was nothing, again, that was trying to be hidden from the public. It was openly discussed in an open meeting. We were directed to make that change. We said we would make that change, and we did it immediately after the hearings were over.
Okay. On page 72 here, you can see there's number 7, which was a $600,000 bond. You can see the interest in terms in the middle of the page. It was a 2.25% interest at 10 years. For some reason, we paid this off in 4. It's one of the lowest interest rate bonds we have, and we paid it off in 4. I'm curious as to why we did that.
We'll answer that question as soon as we can tomorrow.
We'll get you an answer.
Okay. Then-
Certainly, if we had had the question before tonight, we would have had the answer tonight.
But I didn't know these had been changed until I printed this out for myself tonight, because there was no notification of a change being made on this. That's
There was
my
a
point.
notification the last night of the hearing where we discussed that this needed to be changed and updated. It was brought to our attention, and that we said we would do it. So again, we'll get the answer as quickly as we possibly can. Asking us at 8 o'clock on the night that we're presenting this is a fair thing to do. And I think it would be fair to answer it as soon as we can, once we have the correct answer. for
And
you.
I'm not
Yes,
objecting to
tonight.
that. I'm not objecting to that. I'm objecting to the fact that you said that this wasn't asked before. I didn't know before tonight when I was preparing for this, that this had changed. Because there was no notification of a change on budget. There are things that are notified as being changed. This was not one of them. I'd like to now go to page 75. And as you look at this, if you look at the totals, total school line at the bottom, you can see obviously the totals are wrong. You've got a $19 million bond above, and original bond principals is down to 5 million. The next one, same thing, and the outstanding principal, the same thing. Which again makes the total town and school outstanding principal in the $33 million range instead of the $12 million range. And I haven't had time to add all these up to make sure, but it's very clear from the school ones here that the $19 million bond was not added in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Those are my comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Grieve. We'll get that looked at and get it corrected or updated. Oh, wait,
One last thing.
Sure.
An easy way, I'm sorry. An easy way to note when a number has been changed is to put it in red or some other color, green, whatever, the number itself. And that's a good signal that this is the number that's been changed, or these are the numbers that have been changed on it. We use brackets for negative numbers, not red anymore. So it will work.
no, I think it's a fair point, and I think we did that in the past, and maybe it's just an oversight. But I think we've done that in the past. Okay.
I think we just highlighted it.
We highlighted it. I know that we have done it. And then the issue comes down to whether or not you have a color printer. So I know.
We
But,
can certainly highlight it. It's a
but-
good point.
but
We'll make sure
we
that
will-
happens.
We will get that corrected. These are good points. So we'll get it fixed. They were good points. They were good comments. The floor is open. Would anyone else like to come up and have any comments? Is there anybody online? Emily's online. Okay.
President,
Mr. President.
Oh, yep, okay, we're gonna,
we're ready to go back around again.
Sure.
I would just like to make a couple comments. First off, I'd like to thank Matt and Ryan for working with me, if you will. I did propose a change between the residential and the commercial rates, as half the other communities in Rhode Island do, with the potential of saving some money on the residential side. And I only did that because during the evaluation, residential properties saw an average of 29% increase thereabouts. I'm not sure the exact number, where commercial only went up 7%. The flavor here, we could have played with the numbers longer, but the flavor here, I think, was that we don't want to do that in this town. There's a fear of chasing the big companies, the few that we have, the Raytheons. I don't think you're going to chase any of the boat companies out of town, but Raytheon has been a longstanding taxpayer, well-paying taxpayer in the town of Portsmouth, with a decreasing workforce, and we don't want to push them out of town by raising their taxes. I think was the general flavor we discussed here, but I'm sorry that I wasn't successful in coming through with those numbers. I will suggest to the Portsmouth EDC, Economic Development Committee, to take a look at it. Otherwise, I'm just going to give up on trying to gain any extra additional money from the commercial side of people here in Portsmouth, and just concentrate on taxing us residential people, because I think we may be resigned to that. Looking at our streets in town, there's a lot of empty stores. There's lots of commercial property with for sale signs on them. So maybe that's what we're stuck with. It's not really what I would like to see, but that may be the reality here. But I would like to say that it's obvious by Mr. Levesque's proposal and Mr. Hamilton's proposal here that you have counselors here that are trying to think of ways to save people money, or in some cases, spend more money for additional things that people think that we need. So the wheels are always turning. So I don't regret having brought that forward, even though it wasn't successful. The 3.75 to me is just too high. Back in my era, taking 4 years off, the target was 3% or less, and less the better. So we do have some big obligations on the bonds that are approved in the voting booth. When we vote those in, it's going to raise our taxes. So it's just part of reality here. The other thing that I would like to say is that there was discussion here about a homestead tax or exemption. And we as councilors did receive an email from at least one person in town. And I spoke to them this past weekend. She had not received any calls from any of the others that proposed that. But we spoke in some detail that she's on a fixed income. She just wants to stay in town. And I think we have people that are in that situation here. So I will ask this council to expand on those opportunities in the future. I think it's important. Sadly, in this month, we have a tax sale for those individuals that somehow aren't able to afford their taxes. So while we are an affluent community, there are some people that are suffering, and we're here to try and help everybody. So I will approve this budget, but I'm going to strive for some savings again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason.
Mr. President, can I just, the only person, Mr. Gleason, who showed up and spoke about the commercial property was a local businessman who runs Ocean State Air. And he is actually trying to make a go of it. I did have a number of local business people, small in nature, employing a lot of people, who did indicate a problem with the change in the commercial and felt a little bit fed upon. And I'm just doing that in response to your question about doing that.
Mr. President, sorry, real quick. Mr. Gleason, I do appreciate the sentiment. I just wanted to say all the credit belongs to Mr. Rayner and Mr. Helfand, but I do appreciate you.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Rayner. I retract that statement.
No good deed goes on. Dr. Ryan.
Right, not that that affects this budget, but I think going forward, it's been mentioned several times, and I think we really need to look at doing what Newport has done and look into a homestead exemption. What's driving prices up for homes anywhere within 20 miles of the water are as an influx of money from out of the state, New York, Boston, elsewhere, buying up properties in Portsmouth and towns like it, turning them into Airbnbs or to second homes. And people with very deep pockets are part of what's driving up our housing prices and making this town less and less affordable. And we can see what the inevitable consequence of that is. You just look at Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket, which at one point were functioning communities, but are no longer. One of the few ways that we can defend ourselves from this influx of money is to make it a little bit more difficult for people to come in, buy up homes and just keep driving housing prices up and up and up. And a homestead exemption might be a tool to help control that. So I think we definitely need to look at that going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
Point of information, I did ask the tax assessor collector for information on that. Residential properties in town, and this isn't a definite statement, but 80% of the taxes on residential properties are sent, the bill is sent to a place in Portland, a home in Portland. Okay, and I think if we look at, I have a problem with homestead exemption. I'll leave that alone. But I do believe that we seem to have a lot of people who are actually local. And when I actually had a home in Portland, I used to have my tax bill sent to my office in Middletown, so I wouldn't even fit in that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Lebeck. It is a public comment. Okay. Any, what's that? Absolutely.
I just want to make a comment that as a whole, democracy is a system of government by the whole population of the state through elected representatives. Our government is elected by citizens. And I value and appreciate the input from our citizens. I feel that holds and makes us as a town better. I also greatly appreciate the extreme hard work of both the school and the town finance group. I recognize the hurdles that you had to deal with and appreciate your hard work with mitigating problems, being quick to react, and understanding the needs of the citizens, as well as the school system. Support from the state on the school side is dependent on a number of variables, one being the number of students. And to address your concern you had raised earlier, where we want to bring in more students, but we do have this discrepancy of home values, some being quite extreme in this town. It is such a wonderful town that possibly bringing in a tiered tax system might help, where I also am a strong supporter of small businesses. I as well don't want to see closed signs around our town. And I feel this might help lessen the burden on our middle class, have kids in the school system, have it be more approachable to have families come in. We then would get more support from the state.
Thank you, Ms. Blank, for those comments. Any further questions, comments from council or school committee?
I'm just prepared to move to adjourn.
Well, with this, we have there's a public hearing, so we have to close the public hearing first.
Move to close public hearing, Mr. President.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Hamilton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Wow, from the council standpoint.
Mr. President, is the motion to adjourn in order at this time?
Seconded.
Motion. All those in favor? Aye.
A vote in mind meld.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you all. And I do I do want to thank the town administrator, Dr. Kenworthy and the school department, Mr. Rayner, town departments, for all their hard work.